Alan Platt, he was also keen on puppets, but he liked making puppets. So there was a lovely format there, because we were going to then had somebody who could make the puppets, and we were to do the animation, which we said we would do it in our own studio at home. And so he then had this young man who was a puppet maker, and he got him a job as a the word was anyway, more, I have to cut, I can't think of the name. Somebody who looks and got it. Shall we start? So he got this young man who was in the BBC they call a research assistant, and because he couldn't in a place a puppeteer get a job as a puppeteer making puppets. There wasn't anything in the BBC for doing this sort of thing now, especially in schools, and so he was a research assistant and also combined with doing puppets, but he's helped to make the puppets. So he helped to make the puppets in our studio, and we started to make many films. Sleeping Beauty, the Peter and the Wolf, we did that again, but this time we did it in stop motion puppets and that. And it was sort of all these wonderful films that we loved doing and making them, and with the teamwork. And we were also promised by them, the BBC, that no worry to put it through an agent, because BBC is your agent, you're going to get work. As long as you make money and you make successful films, you won't ever want to anybody to, we'll to have all the work you can supply, which they did for many years. Not knocking it, I went on for years and years and years and years making films. But their promise was, you create a, more or less it was like creating a Sesame Street, they have in New York, but it was creating a setup that could be continuous, and if I wasn't there, it will be carried on after me. And so this was a marvellous plan. I didn't need to go through agencies or nothing, it was direct from the BBC. And so it was a joint effort between BBC, and the contract says that, it's a joint venture between an outside firm, Bura and Hardwick, and the BBC. And so we went out making these films. But as I say, Lime Grove couldn't cope with all the productions that they wanted for entertainment after the children's programmes in the evening, and so something had to go. We ended up making the films, filming them in the tin shed, which was called tin shed. And in that tin shed, lots of marvellous things happened to us, and that was funny things that happened to us with terrific memories when I think of it. But along came somebody from about higher up and said, "You're going to be doing your puppet theatre, and we're going to be making this puppet theatre." And I thought, there was always wanted to create children's shows inside what was Lime Grove Studio that hadn't been built yet. And it's to this day, it's on record, there was a puppet theatre built inside the centre. But we worked in the centre, but they say a little bit of knowledge is dangerous. To cut a long story short, a little bit of knowledge is dangerous. It comes to a point where we were making these films, and John and I were making these animated films, but there was the puppet man who was in charge of it told the head of the department that he could make quarter-of-an-hour films, one a week. Well, anybody that knows animation will know that you can't make quarter of an hour. But we tried to tell him, but he knew a way to speed things up and do things. As if all the 6 years that we spent, working with animation, he would know better. But the point was, that folded up. It couldn't, after the first week, we hadn't even shot the first half a minute or minute of it. I'm not sure whether it was half a minute or a minute, but it was beginning to go on and on. And so there was no way we were going to make quarter-of-an-hour films. And then eventually, after not asking our advice, because we'd already experienced it, we then said, he said, "How is it not possible?" And I said, "Well, I'm glad you've asked me. It would take a long while to ask, but of course it's possible. Everything is possible. but you've got to be able to do it in a way. It means to say, if we can do 2.5 minutes a week, you've got to break that 2.5 minutes down to units, and you've got to have so many units until it amounts to all doing parts of that film. So he said, but that sounds like a colossal. I said, well, that is colossal. It is a colossal thing, and you do need more cameramen, more film units. And how many units do you reckon? Well, I said I had thought about it myself, and at least 6. He says, well, we couldn't even afford another 2, never mind 6. No, it'll have to be. Well, another long story, the puppet theatre decided, they closed the puppet theatre down because they really wanted to be, they really needed this theatre for Doctor Who that was starting up. And they were going to do special effects for Doctor Who, and they could use it to store and rehearse in. And so they had the theatre used for Doctor Who. And while we were on this Doctor Who film, we were discovered that the fact is that we were really being pushed completely out of the puppet inside the BBC altogether. And understandable, but we didn't lose our jobs making these puppets outside the BBC. We carried on making them now for education, and all the people in the education field. We had Laurie Lawler and Jeffrey Hall saying that they wanted us, but they were moving on. They were going on to the open door. The Open University, and Laurie Lawler moved on to Open University, and we had that was the end of our contacts there, but the BBC did make a promise to us that they would keep it on, so we thought it was quite safe, and we carried on for many years at our studio. We went and had to buy a bigger studio, of course, so we went down to have a studio in Crouch End, and we bought a church and converted it into a studio, and we did many programs from there. And we used the church, and we used it up and broke the church up into units of everybody that was making puppets for us, and making sets for us, and making props for us. Each one was different places working their own little job, but when we all came together to make a production, and then when there was no production in the making, they would all go their own ways and do it. And it was a wonderful setup, but we didn't think that we would come down with problems there. We had problems that the council didn't like the idea, as we were giving it as a puppet theatre. We were breaking the place up, and there was all different individuals doing jobs and doing their own thing there, when we only had permission. So to cut a long story short, it looked like that we were getting so much pressure, ridiculous really, but the point is we were doing more than just the film. But even though we were all associated with one another, coming together to make a production, they tended to give us a bad time, and we had to sell the studio to Dave and Annie of the Rhythmics. They bought the studio, and they were very happy with it because we had soundproof studio in there as well. Whereas when we had it in other places that we worked before we bought the studio, it was only a silent stage, because we did most of the stuff silent anyway, because everything was on the soundtrack, and we broke the soundtrack down, and we did the animations and that. And so we went on to doing it looked like we were closing down from there, and we thought that could see that the BBC had a think tank in that decided that everything shouldn't be done the way it's being done, even though it's a successful show and successful. We never had anything where any of our productions were over what they estimated. They all was a success, and they're closing us down in the sense that they were laying off altogether films being done by the BBC. So their promise of keeping us on as a joint venture now became that we had to go it alone. And it was a bit late in life to go it alone when you haven't got people, actors and producers, and everybody establishes with an agent, and the agent works hard to make your name. And we didn't need to make a name. We had all our source of income coming from the BBC. So there was only one thing we could do. We thought, let's try for the lottery. Let's see if we go in for the lottery. And if we can get the lottery, somebody could see that it's no fault of ours. It's not as if we were making so many failures. There's never been a failure. We've won the BAFTA award 3 times. We've been a successful production. Why are they just chucking us down and leave? But they apologise that this is a new system now. Everything has to be done as outside. BBC is not going to be doing anything like that anymore. They're not doing joint ventures. It's all got to be done as outside. We applied to the lottery, and the lottery shocked us, because even though we really, it's got to the point where we had no finance, we've lost all the money that we had in ploughing it into making our equipment second to none in the world, and it is second to none in the world. We've got stuff that there's nobody in the world has got some of the things that we have to be able to make puppet films. And we got a letter, well, I did a couple of days ago, I got a letter saying that from the lottery that we must have put as much in as they give. And I thought to myself, well, golly, we are. What with all this equipment and all the stuff, it must value to something. But they decided that it's not the sort of thing that they would sponsor. But there's hundreds of films been made, all successful films. I'm wondering whether or not the lottery and the BBC, which I'm going to apply for, whether they say they or they, they're going to give me or not. Give me an estimate of what value they put on those films, and if they're usable, and if they don't want, they could sell them to me. I'll find the money from somewhere. If they're not going to use them, but if they are, they can put a valuation on them. They can put a valuation on them. There's a possibility. Then the BBC can give us this, as we ask. We can get a sponsor, because we have something there in the way of films. Can't be in the way of equipment, because even though our equipment's worth many thousands of pounds, what's the good of having a miracle projector that can do, nobody can show or do what that projector can do? It's priceless. It's priceless in the sense you can't put a valuation on it unless you have the skilled people that know how to handle it. And it needs skill. It really needs skill. It's not a thing that anybody just can come in and do. And so we're still not giving up hope, because it's not for me, I'm too old. But the point is, there's a chance.
Would you like to teach this to someone?
Pardon?
Would you like to teach your trade to someone, to young people?
Yeah, I'd say. Good. Sure. Yes, well, the point is, just before we packed up from the converted church into a theatre, we were training people. We had at least 8 people being trained to do the stuff, and they've all gone into good jobs at the moment. So there's no worry about them going in jobs, but there's a lot of stuff, there's a lot of valuable stuff that's in our equipment that's been lost, in the sense that we could carry on and train, and I'd already trained, because there's my nephew, which is Clifford, who had worked in many successful jobs, wanted to try it, and he did very well at it, and he was learning how to use this equipment. But the point is, I also had to tell him and tell his father there's no future in it as it goes at the moment. Looks like there's not going to be a future.